Okay, so here again we have another kind of um, graphic showing us our three domains. Again, we have bacteria, we have archaea, and we have eukarya. These ones are more related because they are made out of prokaryotic cells. Oh, it doesn't want me to write over there. And then these ones are made of eukaryotic cells. Okay, and then all of the stuff is inside is kind of written on a sort of sideways cladogram. Okay, you don't have to worry too much about that. It's just showing you in a visual way how the domains are related. All right, so first, if we talk about archaea, these are probably the first cells to evolve. These are not ones you come in contact with on a daily basis, and these aren't even very, very common. These live in very, very harsh environments. These are typically really small single-celled organisms or bacteria, and these are the things that can live in like really, really hot places. Like, for example, there are some bacteria that are called thermophiles, and they live in like volcanic vents or thermal hot springs, places where no other organisms can survive, but these ones can because they've adapted to live in this harsh environment. There's organisms called methanogens who live in sewage treatment plants, and they live off of the methane that is given off by decaying waste, basically. Um, there are some that live with, that are fine with acid, living in hot springs or geysers. And then there are also some that like salt, those are called the halophiles, and they live off of the salt that is in some of these places that normally in that very salty environment it would kill organisms. So these are the you could kind of, you have you ever heard the word archaic, meaning really old, really out of date. I kind of, that's how I kind of think of the archaea. They're archaic, they're very old, they're very undeveloped, they live in the really harsh environments, and we really don't come into contact with them on a daily basis. All right, so here is a picture of one. This isn't a methanophile. This is one that would live in like sewage treatment plants and just basically survive off of the methane that's in a sewage plant. So then the next domain is bacteria. Its kingdom's name is eubacteria. Some of them cause disease, and some of them are actually beneficial. So again, it just depends. It's found in all habitats, except for the harsh ones, because the harsh ones get put into that archaea domain. They are important decomposers for the environment. Remember when we were talking about food chains, and we were talking about how if dead animals just laid on the ground and there were no decomposers, those dead organisms would just kind of sit there. It's really important for those bacteria to be able to break down all of the organic molecules that are in the body and return it to the ground and return it and recycle those carbon atoms so that they can be used by the plants and then used by animals and be recycled throughout the environment. So that's all a part of the carbon cycle, and bacteria is a very important part of that. Commercially, bacteria is important for making lots of things like cottage cheese and yogurt and buttermilk and things that are fermented, the kombucha and things like that that people drink these days, sauerkraut, all kinds of fermented things are made with bacteria. And these ones are actually your best friend. These are Escherichia coli. They live in your intestines and they help you break down your food. Actually, a lot of people believe these days that we've become sicker over the years or more susceptible to illnesses because we have gotten so clean that we've gotten rid of a lot of our bugs, like they say. Basically, that means we've killed a lot of our native bacteria, and that makes us more susceptible to the bad bacteria. The more good bacteria you have, there's more competition against the bad stuff. So the E. coli living in your intestines is actually a good thing, and it's really important. You may see ads that Activa or yogurt ads and things like that on TV about putting good bacteria back in your belly. That's because when you take a course of antibiotics, it can kill off a lot of your healthy gut bacteria, and that can actually make you sicker. So, eating yogurt and things like that can help bring back to life your healthy gut bacteria, and because it's actually a really good thing for a healthy individual. Okay, so domain eukarya is divided into kingdoms. We have Protista, fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Okay, so you have Protista, which is the protozoans and the algae. You have fungi, which is mushrooms and yeasts. Plantae is plants, and Animalia is animals. So first we have Protista, and these are unicellular, meaning only one cell. Some of them are multicellular or can form like colonies, but not most of them. Some are autotrophic. What does autotrophic mean? Autotrophic means it can make its own food like plants. So basically that means it is photosynthetic. It can do photosynthesis. And others are heterotrophic. That means they need to take in energy. Humans are heterotrophic, for example. We have to eat in order to take in energy. So some protistas are like us, where they have to take in food, where some are autotrophic, that are more like plants, and they can make their own food. And they're aquatic. They live in aqueous environments, water, ponds, lakes, oceans, things like that. That's where they live. Then you have fungi. These ones are multicellular, except for yeast. Yeast are single-celled organisms, but any fungus you see growing in the backyard, those are multicellular. They're called absorptive heterotrophs. Heterotrophs means, again, that they take in food. Absorptive means that they basically absorb it. Anything that they're growing on, they excrete kind of a digestive enzyme that break down. So like, for example, if it's growing on a log, you see a lot of mushrooms growing on old tree logs. They're secreting a digestive enzyme, which is basically digesting that tree outside of its body, and then it kind of slurps it up from its well, it's got things that are kind of like roots. It kind of takes it up. So it does have to eat like humans, but obviously it does not have a mouth and it doesn't chew. It does it a different way. So it's digests the food outside of its body, and then they absorb it. And their cell walls are made of chitin, which is a carbohydrate molecule. All right, so Plantae, they are multicellular. They are autotrophic. Hopefully by now we know what autotrophic means. That means they are photosynthetic in this case. They make their own food. Okay. They absorb sunlight to make glucose. This is a process called photosynthesis. And they have cell walls made of cellulose, which is another carbohydrate. I'm going to go back here for a sec. Okay. So then we have Animalia. These are probably the ones you're more familiar with, but we are multicellular. And these are ingestive heterotrophs. So heterotrophs mean they have to take in food. Ingestive means to eat. So they digest it inside of their bodies. So we eat it, it goes into our stomachs, it gets digestive. That's how Animalia does it. We feed on plants or animals. Excuse me. I'm too fast again. All right. So here is a chart kind of going through the four kingdoms of this eukarya domain, that kind of gives you examples. So in terms of the organism, these organization of the protistas, they're complex, but they are still single cell. Very few of them are multicellular. They absorbs, they photosynthesize, or they ingest food. They give you some representative organisms. And here's some examples. Protozoans, algae, water molds, and slime molds. If you have a chance to look up slime molds and water molds, I feel like fungi is, Protista and fungus are very interesting kingdoms that we don't really talk about a whole lot. But if you look at some of their, just how diverse they are, it's really pretty interesting. All right, so then we have fungus. And again, they absorb their food. They are in absorptive heterotrophs. Some are unicellular, but most of them are multicellular. Um, they have some filamentous forms with specialized complex cells, and they are basically yeast and mushrooms. Same thing, plants, multicellular, photosynthesis, animals, multicellular, they ingest food, and lots of examples there. Okay, so this is a good kind of chart to represent the biggest differences between the organisms. All right, so taxons. Most genera contain a number of similar species. Um, the genus Homo is an exception, only contains modern humans. So genera is plural for genus, in case you were wondering. So here they're talking about all the genuses or genera. And then here it says the genus Homo is an exception. It only has one species in it. Classification is based on evolutionary relationships. This is, I find, a very interesting pie chart because you can see it basically breaks down all the known species. You see all of this yellow here? That is basically almost the whole pie chart, and it is all insects. Insects and bugs, okay, make up the most of the number of species on this planet. And then if you look at mammals, it's this tiny little red sliver right here. That is mammals. There's only about 4,000 known species, but we take up just the tiniest fraction of all of the known species. But then if you think about it, I mean, we cover a lot of the earth with, if you're talking about mammals. So it's kind of interesting. I like looking at how many more species there are of insects than anything else. There's actually more different species of sponges than there are of mammals. Okay.